What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Fantasy Few. It is once again Medal Monday. We're here to hand out medals to the top performers and the weakest performers of the fantasy football week. And I think we're just going to jump straight into things today, guys. And we're going to start with the Fantasy Zero of the week. And number 3 is Chris Godwin. So, does somebody want to talk about his day in performance?
Yeah, it was a rough one for Chris Godwin. The lowest amount of points he scored all year is 8.5. That was back in like week 3. So having stakes in him as well as Tom Brady in the same league, in my same league, have them stacked. Um, it wasn't a very fun day from either position. Obviously, they got the win, so it means more in real life than it does for fantasy. But yeah, I was just kind of disappointed to only get 4.5 points out of Chris Godwin. He had 4 catches for 24 yards and 1 fumble, which obviously that's never fun having turnovers. But yeah, his lowest reception total on the season was 3. And again, that was back in week 3, I believe, where he had 55 yards on those 3 catches. So this one was a real dud for him.
All
We
right,
good. We
number
good.
2, we're off of the Chris Godwin subject. We're here to talk about the next biggest upset of the week. That would be Najee Harris, the man himself who has 36 touches a week. Only managed 11 touches this week, so we saw his fantasy value depreciate by half a million. He had 8 carries, 23 yards, 3 catches, 14 yards, and had 6.7 fantasy points. Obviously, since week 1, the absolute worst fantasy performance he has had, and it's not even close. He's been so reliable all season, but I mean, this comes at the helm of Cincinnati absolutely murdering the Pittsburgh Steelers. I mean, it was 41-3 at the beginning of the fourth quarter. So Najee Harris didn't even play like at all in the fourth quarter. Might have played in the beginning part of it if I remember right. And I mean, the game script didn't call for him to be used at all. So Najee Harris, I think he's an obvious candidate for this list, and he came in at number 2 for us.
Right on. And we're going to move into the number one fantasy zero of the week, which would be Nick Chubb. He's been one of the league's premier rushers this year and the last few. He is solid. He's most of the time you start this guy and you think he's going to be the top dog for you. All right, there's a solid 20 points. Don't got to worry about it. Well, you had to worry about it this week because the Ravens were plugging all the rushing lanes. They held both Chubb and Hunt to under 20 yards. That hasn't been done for either of those guys all season long. The Ravens' rush defense is looking legit. But yeah, that's I'm gonna have to go ahead and say Nick Chubb is one of the biggest fantasy zeros of the week, just because we expected more out of him, and he only got his 5.9 points. He played the entire game. I think a lot of it has to do with the crappy Cleveland Browns play calling. I don't know what they're doing over there with Baker Mayfield beat up. They're lacking pass catchers. They need to run the heck out of the ball. Nick Chubb needs more than 8 carries. He only had 16 yards, and Kareem Hunt needs more carries as well. But that's all I'm going to say about that.
As I say, I don't care what defense they're playing against. Nick Chubb needs more than 8 carries. I don't care if they're good against the run. I don't care if it's Tampa Bay's defense who's good against the run. Nick Chubb, if he's getting under 10 carries a game, the game plan was wrong. And as a Cleveland Brown team, you're not going to win ever with that amount of carries, Sam.
I just want to hop in here real quick. I said it last week. This team they're just in shambles. Like apparently their locker room is dividing right now. People are trying to be for Baker, but most of the locker room's against him because of the antics on and off the field. I believe it was Kareem Hunt's father. He just came out and started talking about the game plan and how they're not involving Kareem Hunt.
Kareem Hunt's been hurt for freaking 3 weeks.
I'm just saying, with what carries and touches he got coming back for his first game, like I said, I said this last week, it's just this team is imploding right now. They're kind of resorting back to the old Cleveland Browns that we know and love, the ones that always suck every year. And I don't think this is going to get better. Hopefully it doesn't affect Nick Chubb in the long run, but I don't think the bad games against teams or the low scoring games where they just barely beat the Lions. You have opportunities. You had 4 interceptions of Lamar Jackson, and they could not win a game. They still lost like 16-10. It's absolutely crazy. And like I said, I hope it doesn't affect Nick Chubb in the long run, but I feel like all the chemistry and everything that's boiling over in the locker room is going to continue to affect the play on the field.
Yep, exactly. I don't know who's the worst organization at this point. Is it Detroit or Cleveland? Because Cleveland finally gets a good team, and they're just absolutely squandering every opportunity they have with it. So it's just
They're still hanging in there.
yep, they are hanging in
Still
there,
hanging in
but
there.
by a thread at this point. The AFC is so tough this year. But at the end of the day, our Fantasy Zero award is handed to Nick Chubb. Sorry, Nick Chubb, we love you, but I mean, this is just a performance that's worth forgetting. We're going to move on to the Underdog Award of the Week, and I'm going to hand things over to Mason so we can talk about the number 3 position.
Guys, coming in, Mac Jones, potentially Rookie of the Year, coming in hot. He completed 23 of 32 passes for 310 yards, 2 touchdowns, and their win over the Titans. Now, typically, you see those stats from a quarterback. He had like 21 fantasy points. And you're just like, okay, that's like an average quarterback. But looking at this rookie who is just really coming together full steam, he just had his best passing yards of the season so far. His favorite target this week was Kendrick Bourne. He hit him for a 4-yard touchdown, a 41-yard touchdown pass. It seems like there's a real hookup there. Plus, their defense is just playing outstanding. I just think the whole team coming together, Mac Jones just kind of paving the way, getting better each week. He is going to be the factor of whether they make a playoff push or not, in which they are making a playoff push right now. So he is my nominee for Fantasy Underdog of the Week.
Jumping into number 2, Jalen Waddle, and I believe he was ranked number 1 fantasy wide receiver this week with 28.7 fantasy points. He had 9 receptions, 137 yards, and 1 touchdown. I personally, I didn't think that he was doing as good as what he actually is based on the numbers and what that team has produced in the past couple of weeks, because you don't hear a lot about him. You don't hear Jalen Waddle's name being thrown in there with a lot of the elite receivers, even some of the younger guys like Jamar Chase, who he came out with in the draft, Devontae Smith. He just seemed to be named more, name dropped, I guess. But with Jalen Waddle in the past couple of weeks, he's just been balling out for this team. Going back to week 9, he had 16.3 points. Week 10 against Baltimore, he had 10.1, kind of low. But then against the Jets, he had 20.6 with a rushing touchdown. And then, like I said, this week he had 28.7. Stone kind of mentioned this that earlier when we were talking, that he's turning into almost the de facto number 1 for Tua. And I don't think it's even really close. I know Mac Hollins, I said that every time, Mac Jones. Mac Hollins, he's kind of producing. He's showing out a little bit. Mike Gesicki, he's also there, but he's been missing in and out of games. I think 2-3 weeks ago, he had 0 catches on like 8 targets. That's just astonishing to me. Jalen Waddle, after drop issues in the beginning of the year and just kind of not playing, I guess, great, he's starting to pick it up. He had his first career 100-yard game, and I just kind of see the sky being the limit for this kid.
All right, yeah, and like Paul said, like we talked about it off camera, but Jalen Waddle, we weren't sure if he'd be a candidate for Underdog, so that was kind of the deciding factor on why he wasn't the winner of the award today. And instead, we decided to put at number 1 Hunter Renfrow with 8 catches, 134 yards. He had 21.6 fantasy points. Not many people expected him to get the explosion of yards that he did, but people at this point should be starting him in their flex pretty much in a week in, week out basis. He's definitely proved that he's going to usually score you a good amount of fantasy points. But I think a big thing of us deciding he was an underdog was last week when he had a very mild 7-point performance, if I remember correctly. People were just now finally claiming off the waivers he has a 7-point performance, and people were just immediately like, okay, yeah, why did I even pick him up? He's obviously not worth it, right? But last week we stated here on the show, don't be afraid to start him next week. He's definitely worth starting, especially against Dallas, in my opinion. And it turned out to be correct. So Hunter Renfrow, I think he's an easy Underdog of the Week award. I don't know if you guys have anything to put in on that.
He wins it. I think you guys said it pretty well.
All right, then we can just move straight into our weekend workhorses, and we will start with the number 3 position. That would have been Elijah Mitchell. Who has something to say about Elijah Mitchell today?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and take this one, guys. This pains me to say that we are nominating him for one of the weekend workhorses. I am sad because I benched him in 2 leagues, but we'll get past that. He carried the ball for 27 times for 133 yards, caught the ball 5 times for 35 yards. The guy had a great performance. He is proving that when healthy, he is the 49ers' number one lead back. I think you guys can lean to this guy for a late playoff push. Start this guy every week when he is healthy. I was a little hesitant because of the rib and the finger injuries. I thought he was going to get like a little limited. I didn't know if he was going to get hurt in the game again or not, but he is a solid back. He had a total of like 27 points, I think, for the total on the day. The guy did great. Well, but let's go ahead and move on to number 2.
Yeah, before I say number 2, I just want to quickly add Elijah Mitchell is not the number 1 running back in San Francisco. Everyone, forget what Mason said. It's Deebo Samuel. He will always be their number 1 running back there. He's their number 1 every position they have. But moving into number 2, we got Cordero Patterson, also one of those guys that can be the number 1 position for every position on the Atlanta Falcons. He had 16 carries for 108 yards and 2 touchdowns. Only 2 catches for 27 yards, but that equivalates to 27.5 fantasy points. And just another great day from Cordero Patterson, literally proving he can do it all. 16 carries, targeted only 3 times in this game. He went from getting a mass production in the receiving category to this week taking a step back in the receiving category and playing almost every single down as an exclusive running back. It was interesting to see, and I think that might have just been their specific game plan against Jacksonville, to be honest, was just to line him at running back and just let him pound it in there and destroy him. But whatever it was, it worked fine. Cordero Patterson.
I love Patterson.
Yeah, very easy nominee for number 2. I'm just sad that this guy wasn't figured out and utilized correctly in an offense until this late in his career.
I know.
That's a big what if.
Well,
right?
I mean, I don't know if it's necessarily teams didn't try to figure it out because New England tried. They played him at running back, hybrid receiver. They just had more mouths to feed. And the same thing with Chicago last year. You've seen him play a lot in spelling David Montgomery as the 3-down running back. You've seen him play out of the slot a couple times on the outside. So I think it's just kind of a mixture of everything coming together for him in Atlanta, where they don't have a lot of options. They have, I wouldn't say a bad running back in Mike Davis, but somebody who's not a true number 1. I just think the stars align for Cordero Patterson this year in his career.
Yep, that makes me happy, but we can move on from him and talk about the number 1, the very obvious choice.
Joe Mixon. He's been my one lone bright spot in multiple fantasy leagues this year. I'm not doing too hot. In the league that I really have him focused as my primary part of offense, I'm 1-10. And I still, I'm not going to win.
Way to come online and say that loud and proud, baby.
Hey, I'll say it. It is what it is. I've called a lot of bad breaks. I've lost games by 3 points after getting players to have 42 points in a day. It's one of those seasons that you go through, and anybody who plays fantasy religiously, you're already going to know what I'm talking about. But to get into Joe Mixon's day, going into halftime in a blowout of the Pittsburgh Steelers, he had 20 carries for 117 yards. And he didn't even play the last 12 minutes of the game while finishing with 28 carries, 165 yards, 2 touchdowns. Now, he did kind of regress in the receiving game, which wasn't very fun, but he had 4 catches. So in PPR, that's an extra 4, but he had negative 2 yards. You'd like to see that obviously be positive and go for maybe 15 to 20 yards just based on the catches. But I can't really complain. The only complaint I have about him is that this game was a blowout, 41 to 10 it finished with, but that he didn't play the last 12 minutes of the game. I feel like if he had, he easily could have got close to the 200-yard mark, and we might be talking about him as a potential fantasy hero.
He had 90 yards by the end of the first quarter.
Yeah, it was insane. Yeah. And I mean, 32.3 fantasy points. Anybody's going to love that for their fantasy team in a year where running backs aren't scoring anything. Joe Mixon's been one of those guys that you can rely on every single week, and he definitely proved again why he was the weekend workhorse, so that's why we're giving him out the award this week. Congratulations to the Cincinnati Bengals, too, for just absolutely mud-stomping the Steelers. I mean, oh my goodness. Cincinnati's
looking like a
playoff
playoff team.
For real. Yep. We're going to move on to the Gunslinger Award. We are going to start with the number 3 position. Does anybody got anything on that?
Yeah, so I'll go ahead and take this one, guys. I think Dak Prescott deserves to fall in at number 3 after playing the Chiefs and putting up a horrible performance, making our fantasy 0 list. He comes back on Thanksgiving Day and gets in a shootout. The beginning of the game was kind of slow, but I think one of the main reasons we have Dak on this list, he threw for 375 yards, 2 touchdown passes without his 2 top pass catchers, guys. He didn't have Amari Cooper, he didn't have CD Lamb, and some other guys stepped up. Michael Gallup, like we said, start Michael Gallup. We said start Cedric Wilson. Guys both had an incredible game. That's because Dak can put the ball where he needs to. They couldn't get it done at the end of the day. So I think that's why he's making it number 3 on our list. But overall, great performance by Dak. Way to come back and show us that you are the man, buddy. Let's go ahead and move into number 2.
Yep, number 2 is going to be the guy who was battling him on the other side, who was also in the shootout, and that would have been Derek Carr. He had 21 fantasy points, nothing crazy, but if you started him, you're not mad at yourself at all, that's for sure. He had 371 yards and a touchdown. One of them was the big bomb to Deshaun Jackson. Outside of that, nothing crazy on the day. There's not much to say about Derek Carr's performance. He just played pretty well, and then outdueled Dak Prescott on Turkey Day. Took it in Dallas too, so it's like it's definitely worth mentioning. But I think an honorable mention for this list also, we haven't said his name, is Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers definitely had a great game against the Rams and took them down with ease, it seemed like. So he's an honorable mention, but Derek Carr, solid game.
With COVID.
Solid game and beat Dak Prescott. So that's all I have to say about Derek Carr. We can just move straight into number 1.
So, number 1. You guys might recall, if you've been watching our weekly MVP race updates, he was one of my first nominees. He was one of the first guys before I kept switching and just kind of going with the rotational MVP. That's Josh Allen. On Thanksgiving Day, the Sunday night game, it's kind of the pinnacle of being able to play on Thanksgiving. He was 23 for 28, 260 yards, 4 touchdowns, albeit he did throw 2 interceptions. He had added an extra 8 carries for 43 yards to a total of 26.7 fantasy points. And this kind of goes back to what I had discussed a couple weeks ago on one of our MVP videos, that some of these guys are going to have games where it just propels them to the top of the list. It's going to seem like a critical moment, or it can drop you from the list. And I think we kind of seen that with Josh Allen. 4 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Obviously, the 2 interceptions aren't great, but he's still putting up points, producing, and they blew out New Orleans. On the flip side of that, like I said, with some guys are going to have bad games and kind of lose position in the race. Like I said earlier, Lamar Jackson had 4 interceptions. And that's not to say he's completely out of it. But all I'm saying is some of these guys are going to prove why they should be in the race as compared to others, and why they're going to solidify a chance to actually win the MVP. And I think with a performance like this, while losing your top defensive player, in my opinion, in Tre'Davious White to a torn ACL, I just think that Josh Allen showed why he's considered one of the best one of the best quarterbacks in football. And exactly why he should be included in the MVP race going forward.
Yep, Josh Allen's an absolute monster. I don't have much to add on to that. I think Josh Allen, through these last few years, has just completely solidified why he's one of the NFL's finest quarterbacks and absolutely elite. Easy winner of the Gunslinger Award this week with his 4 touchdown performance. I think we're going to move on to our regrettable section now. These are the 3 guys that we regret starting in our leagues. We call them the Regrettables. And I'm going to throw it over to Mason so he can talk about his guy.
Guys, I did it again 2 weeks in a row. I looked at the matchup. The Giants were on Miles Sanders' hit list. And while they normally give up a bunch of points to the running back position, that did not happen against Philly. I don't know what to blame it on. I mean, Miles Sanders still came in. He did okay. He got me like 6.5 fantasy points in a half-point PPR league. This is a league where I benched Elijah Mitchell, and it was basically for Miles Sanders, so go Mason. But, I mean, looking at the total overall performance of that offense, I don't necessarily blame Miles because Jalen Hurts just did not play well. He threw 3 interceptions. He ran the heck out of the ball himself, but he could not throw. He could not keep the offense alive. So my regrettable of the week is Miles Sanders yet again, unfortunately.
Yeah, I feel like I'm partially to blame for that because I know in our Flex Friday video that I had kind of talked up Miles Sanders just because of the matchup, because of the fact that Philadelphia was on such a historic tear for rushing the ball. I myself, if I had Miles Sanders in any of my leagues, I would have started him. I had started him in one. But again, that's a lot of it was based on the matchup with the Giants. And that game, probably, if, like you said, he hadn't thrown 3 interceptions, I feel like that game could have been completely different because it ended, I think, at 13-7, and they had a chance to
Yeah,
even win it like 3 times from the
I know.
15.
Giants are
But
horrible.
yeah, enough of that. We'll get into mine. In mine, I've been regretting not putting him as a regrettable so far. Kyle Pitts. Like I absolutely love everything
Oh,
about him,
man.
but it's just with this offense, with Matt Ryan getting up there in age, the line not being able to protect, with them kind of trying to, I guess, not force feed, but because he's their best option, Cordero Patterson, it's just there's no one to take pressure off of potentially guarding Kyle Pitts from double teams. You don't have Calvin Ridley out there. You're playing with guys like Zacchaeus. You're playing with guys like Russell
Zucchini.
Gage. It's just I feel like everything's kind of stacked against him, but also at the same time, I just keep putting my faith in seeing the same Kyle Pitts that I saw at Florida.
Yeah.
The 6'6", athletic tight end that can play inside, outside. He runs a 4.4. And I feel like a lot of this hinges on the 2 times where he had 20-point games back to back in the middle of the season. And outside of that, I don't think he's past 10 in any game. And I continuously start him. I've continued to start him. And I think it's almost getting to the point where I have to bench him, even though that's not necessarily what I want to do, because I feel like as soon as I do, he's going to find that spot in the offense and he's going to blow up. But also at
Yep.
the same time, I've been saying that for 5 weeks now, 6 weeks. So if you guys have Kyle Pitts, I don't know your tight end situation. I have no idea who's on waivers, who your backups are. But if you're stubborn like me, you've continued to start him. But I think it's time that we have to bench him, Kyle Pitts owners. It's just
That's
it's
a good
getting
point.
too risky and too bad to continue to play him.
You say that's risky.
Very good.
I've been starting this guy since week 1 in every single league I'm in, and since I think like 4 weeks ago, it's just been absolutely horrifying. And I mean, come on, man, Cortland Sutton. This man is he's a stud. Don't get me wrong,
Zach
very
Island.
very talented player, but they will just refuse to feed him at all costs in Denver. I mean, the man over the last like 5 weeks is just averaging like 4 targets a game. It is just so sad for me as a Cortland Sutton fan because I know the impact that he can have on his team. I mean, he still is up to like almost 700 yards receiving on the season now with these like 5 straight horrible games. I mean, Cortland
Yeah.
Sutton's a great receiver. I don't know why they won't involve him. He's definitely my regrettable the past few weeks just because like I won't let go of this sign of hope like Paul has with Kyle Pitts. I just won't let go of the hope I have in Sutton. But at this point, I'm just thinking like I have Van Jefferson on my team, benched him for Cortland Sutton in the league, and it's just like
And Jefferson.
Jefferson might be the safer pick at this point because I mean he only had 3 catches this week, but he had 9 targets. That's 6 more targets than what Cortland Sutton's getting a week. So Cortland Sutton's definitely my easy regrettable of the week, and I think a lot of people can agree with me there that Cortland Sutton's just been a massive headache this year because you want to start him every week because of his talent, but you look at his stats and it's just like man, I can't justify myself starting him ever. Uh, we're going to move away from the 3 regretables of the week, and we are going to talk about our fantasy hero of the week. Everybody, give it up for playoff Lenny Four Tutties, baby. He had 17 carries for 100 yards, 3 touchdowns, 7 catches, 31 yards, and an extra touchdown on top of that. 44 points. Lenny Four Tutties, 44 points. All the fours, all the stars aligned. Leonard Fournette had a day. Do you guys have anything to say about old playoff Lenny?
Yeah, I just
I
want to say
think
real
he's
quick.
becoming sorry. I think he's
No, you're good.
becoming regular season Lenny, not just playoff Lenny anymore. It's almost like he's kind of tuning into when he played at LSU, just dominating defenses left and right. But I also think a lot of this comes from playing in the same offense as Tom Brady and those receivers. You can't just sit back and guard one over the other. It's either Leonard Fournette is going to be able to dominate you on the ground like he has so many times this year, or it's you're going to get passed on by Tom Brady and these receivers. But yeah, it's nothing but love for Leonard Fournette this week. I'm so thankful to have him in multiple leagues. But yeah, I mean, that's really all I got. What do you got, Mace?
No, I was just gonna say that that game that they played against the Colts are red hot, by the way. They have a bunch of hype going right now. Not only that, the fact that they're on Hard Knocks, they are just coming together as a football team and playing extremely well. Hi, Spyro. But I would have to give a majority of the credit to that win on Leonard Fournette. Give him the game ball. Give him the fantasy hero of the week. The guy played outstanding. He hopefully won you guys some leagues. Got you some wins this week in the playoff race that we're in. But other than that, guys, I don't have much to say.
Yeah, so that's all we got.
I do just want to say something real quick. I
Right.
just want to say something real quick. I'm sorry. For as him being a fantasy hero, he was almost a fantasy villain, or I guess not a fantasy, but he was almost a real life villain for his own team. You know how a lot of the times at the end of the games, players have a chance to score, but with time left, and you're just like, oh, don't do it. We'll be able to do it and run the clock out. His last touchdown that left about 32 seconds on the clock, and then the Colts came back with like a 70-yard kick return.
Yeah.
I mean, it put them up to a point where they were up by 7, but at the same time, if they kicked a field goal, ran the clock out, won the game, no issues. And they about lost it simply because of him scoring that touchdown. But for fantasy aspects,
Fantasy
you were
hero,
ecstatic with
baby.
him getting that extra 7, or I think it was probably about 9 points maybe. So I think it was a 30-yard run on top of the 6 points for the touchdown. So absolutely incredible.
Yep, playoff Lenny. Huge performance, just like last week with Jonathan Taylor at the 50 bomb. We expected the fantasy hero not to be a weekly thing, but if people are scoring 45 points a week, then there's going to have to be a fantasy hero every week because you don't expect that out of playoff Lenny. You expect him to be like a 16, 17-point guy, so absolutely absurd day out of him. That's all we got today, though, for the video. If you guys are listening to this on Spotify, we're about to send you guys over to the Target Tuesday waivers, so just give us a second. We're going to go to an ad break, and we'll see you right here in a minute. But if you're listening to this on YouTube, you can go ahead and like the video if you enjoyed it, comment down below, subscribe to the channel. Paul's going to point up there, but it's down low. Actually, you can't click on the one on screen. Paul does it every time. We know him very well by now. My dog is jumping all over me. She says she wants to go outside, so I'm just going to give things over to Mason so he can kick us out of here.
Fantasy Few out, baby. Let's go.